In a city that never sleeps, peace can hide the darkest kind of violence. A paralegal's blood spattered across a bedroom wall. A lover's crumpled in her apartment doorway. A woman's burning in an olive bathtub. And a husband and wife gunned down beneath their own roof. Each crime shattered a promise of safety, leaving only grief to echo through the silence. Now, justice can cage the guilty, but it can never resurrect the lost. And this is, inside Houston's most dangerous black killers. Shocking murders and true crime documentary. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1, Erik Arceneaux. She thought it was just another morning in Houston. But by nightfall, her name would headline every news broadcast. Maria Jimenez Rodriguez, a 29-year-old paralegal and devoted mother, vanished on the 21st of June 2018. That morning, she dropped her young daughter off with a babysitter before heading to work. She never arrived. The man later accused in her disappearance was her former gym trainer, 47-year-old Erik Arceneaux. Investigators alleged that he killed her inside his Houston home, dismembered her body with a chainsaw, and disposed of the remains that have never been recovered. The first signs of trouble appeared just hours after Maria went missing. Her CO workers received text messages from her phone claiming she would be late to the office and that she was being followed by 3 Hispanic men. Her sister Gloria immediately grew suspicious. Maria's writing style was distinctive, and the tone of those texts felt robotic and wrong. When Maria failed to pick up her daughter later that day, her family reported her missing. Police discovered her truck abandoned near a rail yard only a few blocks from her house. Surveillance footage showed a man resembling Arceneaux calmly walking away from the vehicle. When questioned, Arceneaux insisted Maria never showed up that morning. But detectives soon discovered that his and Maria's cell phones were together at his home on Avella Street during the time she disappeared. That digital clue opened the case wide. A forensic search of Arceneaux's house revealed traces of blood on the walls and ceiling of his bedroom. Under luminol, the entire room glowed. DNA confirmed it was Maria's. Investigators also uncovered surveillance footage from a nearby Home Depot, taken just hours after her disappearance, showing Arceneaux purchasing a chainsaw and heavy-duty trash bags. The receipt bore his signature. Maria's phone was also traced to that same location before it went silent forever. Court records revealed a violent history. Years earlier, Arceneaux had pleaded guilty to aggravated assault for holding a gun to a girlfriend's head. With this background, authorities moved quickly. He was charged with murder in August 2019, but before he could be taken into custody, he fled. For 5 years, Maria's family lived in agony, hoping for justice. In September 2023, members of the U.S. Marshals Gulf Coast Violent Offenders Task Force finally arrested him outside a business in southeast Houston. At his 2025 pre-trial hearing, Arceneaux appeared subdued and expressionless, wearing a county-issued jumpsuit as the judge denied bond. Gloria Jimenez spoke outside the courtroom, 5 years of torture, 5 years of tears. Now, he's finally behind bars. The family continues to beg Arceneaux to reveal where Maria's body is so she can be laid to rest. The case stirred deep outrage across Texas. Many called for stronger stalking awareness and digital privacy laws. Advocacy groups now cite Maria's story as a warning: never dismiss unwanted attention, always document harassment early, and trust your instincts when communication feels wrong. Even small warnings can save a life. In a world wired by technology, silence can speak louder than any scream. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2, Marques Potts. It started as a quiet summer evening in Houston, but by nightfall, an apartment hallway would become a crime scene. Melissa Fowler, a 43-year-old resident at the New Hope Housing Sakowitz complex, was found brutally stabbed inside her apartment on the 29th of July 2023. The man accused of her murder was her boyfriend, 58-year-old Marques Potts, a man with a violent record who was already on probation for a previous stabbing conviction. Investigators later said the case bore every mark of a domestic violence killing that could have been prevented. Surveillance footage showed Potts forcing his way into Fowler's apartment at around 6:30 p.m. using a hand tool. She returned home about 20 minutes later. Moments after entering, she was seen falling into the hallway, bleeding from her chest, and clutching at the door frame as Potts dragged her back inside. A neighbor later recalled hearing 2 screams. Another resident said she told him earlier that week, "Don't call the police, I can handle it." By 7:10 p.m., an employee from the complex reported hearing commotion and screams coming from Unit A202. When he knocked on the door, no one answered. Minutes later, he saw Potts in the hallway, calmly wiping what looked like blood from the floor. When asked what happened, Potts allegedly replied, "I just whooped her ass." The worker immediately called 911. Officers arrived to find Fowler unresponsive near her doorway, suffering multiple stab wounds to her chest and back. Inside the bathroom, they discovered another grim detail: her small puppy, stabbed and left in the tub. Blood-spattered knives were recovered from the scene. Potts had fled before officers arrived. Using surveillance video and witness statements, detectives quickly identified him as the suspect and issued a murder warrant. He was captured 3 days later, on the 1st of August 2023, by the Houston Police Department's Northeast Patrol Crime Suppression Team. Potts was taken into custody without resistance and booked into the Harris County Jail. He was charged with murder and held on $125,000 bond. The court also considered revoking his deferred probation for his prior 2021 stabbing case. During his brief court appearance, witnesses described him as expressionless, his hands clasped behind his back as the judge listed his history of violence. Neighbors expressed deep regret for not acting sooner. "I feel a lot safer now that he's in jail," said resident Stephen Caldwell. The management at New Hope Housing issued a public statement expressing sorrow and confirmed they were increasing on-site security while partnering with the Houston Area Women's Center to improve access to domestic violence resources. Fowler's death became a sobering reminder of warning signs too often ignored. The lesson is clear: never dismiss patterns of control or isolation, seek immediate help when violence escalates, and always alert authorities when a loved one seems in danger. Intervention can mean survival. Love should never come with fear, because silence can be deadly. Number 3. Henry David Cossette. A faint trail of smoke rising from a Houston apartment would expose one of the city's most gruesome crimes. On the 6th of February 2022, Sarah Goodwin vanished after being seen along Bissonnet Street, an area long associated with human trafficking and street prostitution. Surveillance footage captured her getting into a gray Honda CR-V driven by 27-year-old Henry David Cossette. That moment was the last time anyone saw her alive. Cossette later confessed to strangling her inside his apartment before dismembering her body. Sarah's disappearance first appeared to be another case of a missing young woman. Her friend, who had been tracking her phone location, noticed it stopped moving hours after Sarah entered Cossette's Alief area apartment. When the phone went dark, she reported her missing. Investigators soon found her cell phone discarded near the Victoria Park apartment complex, confirming something was terribly wrong. As detectives worked to trace her last known movements, they learned Cossette had picked her up that night and returned home with her. Evidence later revealed that after killing her, he went to a nearby store, bought trash bags, and dismembered her body in his bathtub. He placed the remains in garbage bags and dumped them off a rural stretch of Fellows Road, 13 miles from his residence. 2 weeks later, around 3 a.m., on February 19, emergency crews were called to a fire at Cossette's apartment. Firefighters found him alive inside after he tried to commit suicide by igniting charcoal briquettes. In a spontaneous confession, Cossette told first responders he had killed a woman and described where he had left the body. Detectives recovered human remains from the site he mentioned, later confirmed through DNA testing to be those of Sarah Goodwin. The case quickly transitioned from a missing person investigation to a homicide. Cossette was charged with murder, arson, and tampering with evidence. Prosecutors noted that his detailed confession left little dispute over guilt. Guilt or innocence was never the issue, one prosecutor said. The judge found him guilty in a 2-day bench trial and sentenced him to 45 years in prison. At sentencing, Cossette appeared quiet and detached, occasionally glancing down as the details of the crime were read aloud. Prosecutors described him as someone who looked like an average person, hiding an extraordinary level of violence. Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg condemned him for both the killing and the apartment fire that endangered other residents. Community activist Quanelle X, who helped organize searches for Sarah, called for tougher measures against repeat offenders. Friends remembered Sarah as kind and protective, especially of her younger brother. She didn't deserve this, one friend said through tears. From this tragedy, 3 clear warnings emerge: trust your instincts when a situation feels unsafe, never enter an unfamiliar vehicle without sharing your location, and always report harassment or coercion before it escalates. These small decisions can save a life. Some crimes reveal monsters not in dark alleys but behind ordinary doors, and sometimes they confess only when the guilt begins to burn. Number 4. James Ray Lane. It began with a phone tracker and ended in a doorway stained with blood. On the 28th of June, 2021, 30-year-old Gregory Moore, a father of 4 visiting Houston from New Jersey, was shot to death outside an Airbnb rental in Spring, Texas. The shooter was identified as 21-year-old James Ray Lane, who murdered Moore after tracking his girlfriend's cell phone to the house where she had gone to meet Moore. Prosecutors later called it a jealous ambush, a violent outburst driven by obsession and rage. The night began innocently. Moore and friends were celebrating a trip to Houston when he met a woman at a nightclub. They returned to the Airbnb on Braywen Court, unaware that Lane, her boyfriend, was monitoring her location in real time. Around 3:10 a.m., Lane drove across the city, armed with a handgun and flashlight. Surveillance cameras later showed him approaching the property wearing a hoodie, his phone's light flickering through the dark. As Moore and the woman reached the front door, Lane attacked. He pistol-whipped both before firing 9 shots, striking Moore in the chest, neck, and limbs. Moore collapsed at the doorway, bleeding as his friends rushed for help. Lane fled in a dark-colored sedan with the woman, leaving Moore dying on the ground. When deputies arrived, they found shell casings and phone data that would soon trace the killer's every move. Investigators with the Harris County Sheriff's Office tracked Lane using his cell phone and social media records, confirming his travel from southwest Houston to the crime scene. He was arrested on the 6th of July 2021 and later confessed to the murder. The case took an unexpected turn during court proceedings. After being charged with murder, Lane's bond was initially set at $250,000, later reduced to $100 by Judge Nada Cornelio. He was released and repeatedly violated curfew. When Lane pleaded guilty to murder on the 17th of August 2023, the judge again allowed him to remain free on bond so he could get a haircut before sentencing. The decision sparked national outrage. Andy Cohen of Crime Stoppers said, "In all my years, I've never seen a convicted killer walk free to visit a barbershop." 2 weeks later, amid mounting pressure, the judge revoked Lane's bond. During sentencing, Lane appeared subdued, wearing prison attire, eyes downcast as Gregory Moore's family spoke through tears. Moore's stepmother told the court, "My son can't go get a haircut, he can't see his kids. That man should have been locked up from the start." The judge sentenced Lane to 22 years in state prison. The case reignited debate over judicial discretion and victim rights in violent crime cases. Advocacy groups demanded stricter bond rules for offenders convicted of murder. From this tragedy emerged 3 urgent warnings: never ignore signs of controlling behavior, understand that digital tracking can be weaponized, and trust your instincts when a relationship turns threatening. Awareness and early action can save lives. Love twisted by control becomes obsession, and obsession, once armed, never ends without ruin. Number 5. Deontray Flanagan. What began as a routine morning in Houston turned into one of the most horrifying crimes in recent memory. On the 20th of March 2023, 26-year-old Deontray Flanagan picked up his 2-year-old daughter, Zavia Marie, from daycare. Within hours, he would kill her during a high-speed police chase, live streaming parts of the crime through FaceTime calls to her mother and grandfather. Prosecutors described it as an act of pure rage, born from a breakup that Flanagan refused to accept. Days earlier, the child's mother, Kirsten Watson, had repeatedly called police warning that Flanagan was threatening to harm their daughter. Reports show that on March 15, officers responded to a terroristic threat, and on March 19, to harassment by phone. Watson later said her pleas were ignored. "They didn't believe me," she told reporters. "They thought I was exaggerating because he was the father." That Monday morning, Flanagan drove to the Walmart where Watson worked. He confronted her inside, demanding her phone and passcodes, warning that he would hurt Zavia if she refused. When Watson resisted, he struck her, grabbed the toddler, and fled the scene in a red Camaro. Deputies immediately began tracking Watson's stolen phone, which led to one of the most disturbing police chases Harris County had ever seen. The pursuit lasted nearly 45 minutes, spanning more than 30 miles. Flanagan sped through intersections, drove against traffic, and struck multiple vehicles while screaming into his phone. During the chase, he called both Watson and her father on FaceTime. In one of those calls, he held Zavia on his lap and wrapped his hands around her throat. Watson begged, "Trey, stop. That's your daughter. She loves you." He replied coldly, "This is what you made me do." Her father, Curtis Watson, later told police he saw his granddaughter's lifeless body on the screen. The chase ended in a field outside Street Dunstan's Episcopal Church after Flanagan crashed. A tense 20-minute standoff followed as SWAT officers surrounded the vehicle. Watson pleaded with officers to move in, but by the time they reached the car, Zavia was unresponsive. She was airlifted to a nearby hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. Autopsy results showed she had been beaten and strangled. Flanagan was arrested at the scene and charged with capital murder. At his first court appearance, he appeared calm, speaking softly as the charges were read. Prosecutors requested that his bond be increased from $1 to $2 million, citing the extreme violence and risk to the public. The community response was one of outrage and grief. Many questioned how police failed to act on repeated warnings. Activists called for reforms in how domestic threats are handled, especially when children are involved. From this tragedy arise painful but necessary lessons. Every threat of violence must be treated as real, technology can document but not prevent abuse, and intervention must come before escalation. Early action saves lives. Sometimes the warning signs scream louder than words, but silence allows tragedy to speak for them. Number 6. Keona Mouton. It began as a normal school day in Houston, but by nightfall, a promising student would be gone forever. In November 2018, DeLindsey Mack, a Lamar High School football player, was shot multiple times outside an apartment complex near his campus. The shooting was not random, it was a coordinated ambush. The person accused of setting the trap was Keona Mouton, a fellow student who used Mack's trust to lead him directly into the line of fire. Mack had recently transferred to Lamar from Yates High School to avoid gang violence. But according to his father, he adopted what he called an alternate persona online, pretending to be involved in a gang to protect himself. That decision proved fatal. The rivalry between two local gangs, the 100% 3rd Ward and Young Scott Block, had already spilled into Houston's schools. Prosecutors later said Mouton knew Mack had a crush on her and used it to orchestrate the attack. On the 13th of November 2018, she received a message from Kendrick Johnson, a known gang member, asking if Mack had left the school. Moments later, she walked out with him and another girl. Together, they headed toward a nearby apartment complex. Surveillance footage and witness statements showed Mouton and her friend stopping just before two men pulled up in a car. They jumped out, guns drawn. Mack was hit at least 7 times. One shooter stood over him and fired again as he lay on the ground. Prosecutors described it as an execution carried out in daylight. Investigators identified Johnson as one of the gunmen. He had been linked to several other murders and was described by prosecutors as a cold-blooded sniper for his gang. He received a life sentence in 2021. The getaway driver, Davon Thomas, was caught and sentenced to 50 years in 2023. Mouton, arrested in August 2019, faced charges of first-degree murder. During her 7-day trial in 2024, Assistant District Attorney Sarah Seeley told jurors she pulled all the strings to make his murder happen. The jury agreed, convicting Mouton of murder. She was sentenced to 23 years in prison and must serve at least half before parole eligibility. In court, Mouton appeared silent and expressionless as Mack's mother, Dahlia, faced her. "I hate you. You disgust me," she said. "Those shackles on your ankles, that's my son." The case sent shockwaves through Houston, especially in the River Oaks area. Community members called for stronger intervention programs to stop youth recruitment into gangs. Mack's father blamed social media, saying, "In my time, you had to act to earn hate. Now words and pictures can get you killed." From this tragedy arise lessons that cannot be ignored. Never underestimate the power of social media to endanger young lives, recognize manipulation disguised as affection, and intervene early when violence becomes normalized among teens. Awareness can be the difference between safety and tragedy. One message, one moment, and one misplaced trust can turn a teenage crush into a final goodbye. Number 7. Kwanmaine Boyd. She thought she was meeting her boyfriend to collect a debt. Instead, it became her final encounter. On the morning of the 6th of October 2021, 25-year-old Keona Smith, a Houston entrepreneur and graduate student, was kidnapped and shot to death by her boyfriend, Kwanmaine Boyd. Investigators later confirmed she was just over 4 weeks pregnant with Boyd's child, a pregnancy he had recently learned about and reportedly rejected. The crime, driven by anger and control, unfolded almost entirely in real time through the victim's own desperate text messages. 3 days before her murder, Smith had given Boyd a greeting card that read, "Kwan, I know this isn't what we expected, but W are expecting." It was found beside positive pregnancy tests and an ultrasound photo. Her sister, Brittany Wilson, later told reporters he was not happy and said he didn't want more children. That Wednesday morning, Smith left home to meet Boyd and retrieve money he owed her. Around 6:44 a.m., she texted her sister, "I'm at this location getting my money if anything happens to me." Minutes later, another message appeared, "I have been kidnapped. I'm in the back of Kwan's truck." Then, her phone went silent. Witnesses later reported seeing Smith and a man arguing on Reed Street near Irvington Boulevard. One truck driver told investigators he saw the woman banging on his vehicle, begging him to call 911. He drove off when he noticed a man pointing a long gun. Moments later, gunfire echoed down the street. Residents said the shooter, believed to be Boyd, stood over Smith after firing, then fled in a white pickup truck. Police arrived within minutes to find Smith lying on the pavement, shot in the face. She was pronounced dead at the scene, her phone still clutched in her hand. Detectives with the Houston Police Homicide Division launched an intensive investigation. A receipt for a 9mm firearm and 5.56x 45mm ammunition was found in Smith's apartment, both purchased weeks earlier by Boyd. The ammunition matched shell casings at the scene, and surveillance footage confirmed Boyd making the purchase at a local Academy Sports Plus outdoor store. His white Chevrolet truck was discovered abandoned weeks later, its license plates removed. On the 19th of November 2021, Boyd was arrested without incident and charged with capital murder. A judge denied bond the next day. Prosecutors cited his violent criminal record, which included aggravated robbery and evading arrest, as evidence of his danger to the community. Smith's family described her as the life of the family, pursuing a master's degree in criminal justice. Her sister called the act execution style, saying, "He shot her like a dog and left her like an animal in the street." Her death underscores painful but necessary lessons: always document threats and share them with trusted people, never meet an abusive partner alone, and recognize that controlling behavior can turn deadly. Early intervention saves lives. A single message for help can reveal the truth, but sometimes it's read only after the silence. Number 8. Luis Luna. It started as a late-night emergency call, but what officers found inside that Houston apartment was beyond comprehension. In August 2020, 23-year-old Luis Luna called for help, claiming his daughter, Savia Mason, had stopped breathing while sleeping beside him. He told first responders she had slept in her car seat next to his air mattress and that he might have buckled the straps too tightly. Paramedics rushed the baby to a local hospital, but she was pronounced dead soon after arrival. What seemed like a tragic accident would soon reveal an unthinkable truth. Savia's mother had dropped her off just days earlier for a weekend visit with her father. Luna told detectives he had watched her constantly and never left her side. But when the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences conducted an autopsy, the results exposed a horrifying reality. The infant had died of suffocation. She bore ligature marks around her neck and wrists, showing she had been bound. Forensic evidence also confirmed she had been sexually assaulted, and prosecutors concluded the asphyxiation occurred during that attack. Investigators immediately searched Luna's apartment on West Park Drive, where he lived with his 3 brothers. In a garbage bag found in the sunroom, officers discovered bloody baby wipes but no diaper, details that raised further suspicion. Evidence collected at the scene linked directly back to Luna. The Harris County District Attorney's Office charged him with capital murder, calling the crime one of the most disturbing acts ever seen in the city. Assistant District Attorney Edward Appelbaum described it as the worst kind of evil in the world. The case moved slowly through court, eventually reaching trial 3 years later. Prosecutors presented DNA results, crime scene photos, and testimony from medical experts. The jury heard Luna's initial claim that he accidentally caused the death by over-tightening the straps of her seat. Yet, the physical evidence proved otherwise. After a 10-day trial, the jury convicted him of capital murder. During sentencing, Luna appeared pale and motionless, wearing a gray prison jumpsuit and staring at the floor as the verdict was read. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "This baby couldn't walk or talk," District Attorney Kim Ogg later said, "and she should have been safe with her father. Instead, he violated every measure of trust." The community's reaction was one of shock and grief. Advocates for children's safety renewed calls for early intervention and awareness programs to prevent domestic child abuse. Assistant District Attorney Appelbaum thanked the jury, saying, "No one wants to believe crimes like this happen, but justice demands acknowledgement of that horror. From this tragedy emerge haunting lessons: never ignore signs of harm in vulnerable children, report concerns immediately to authorities, and understand that trust alone cannot guarantee safety. Prevention begins with awareness, vigilance, and courage to act. Some crimes silence even the strongest voices, but justice must speak for those who never had a chance." Number 9. Antonio A.J. Armstrong Jr. It began as a quiet summer night inside a home once filled with faith, discipline, and love, until gunfire shattered everything. In the early hours of the 29th of July 2016, police were called to the Bel Air area home of former NFL player Antonio Armstrong Sr. and his wife, Dawn. Both were shot in their bedroom as they slept. Their son, Antonio A.J. Armstrong Jr., was the one who made the 911 call. What seemed like a break-in soon unfolded into one of Houston's most haunting family murder cases. Investigators learned that tensions had been building inside the Armstrong home. Prosecutors revealed that A.J.'s parents had grounded him for poor grades and marijuana use. 2 days before the murders, A.J. had allegedly poured gasoline on the staircase near his parents' room and set it on fire. He also test-fired his father's .22 caliber pistol through blankets in his own room, later covering the hole in the floor with socks. Alarm data became central to the case. Records showed the house was locked, with no signs of forced entry. At 1:08 a.m., A.J.'s phone was unplugged. 1 minute later, sensors on the second floor were triggered, followed by activity on the first floor. Prosecutors argued A.J. used his phone's flashlight to move through the dark house. At 1:40 a.m., he called 911, claiming to have heard 2 gunshots. During the 16-minute call, he never mentioned seeing an intruder and never checked on his parents. When officers arrived, they found Dawn dead and Antonio Sr. gravely wounded, a pillow covering his face. A handgun and a handwritten note reading, "I have been watching you for a long time," lay on the kitchen counter. Investigators found no evidence of a break-in and quickly turned their attention to the only person inside the locked home, A.J. Prosecutors built their case on motive, alarm data, and forensic discoveries, including a crucial 2023 finding, a fleck of Antonio Sr.'s blood on the back of a visitor's sticker A.J. wore that night. Defense attorneys argued there was no gunshot residue or fingerprints linking A.J. to the weapon, suggesting instead that his half-brother, Josh, who suffered from mental illness, could have been responsible. After 2 mistrials, the third trial in 2023 ended with a unanimous guilty verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the now 24-year-old A.J. stood motionless, eyes lowered, before receiving a life sentence. The divided community reacted intensely. Supporters insisted on his innocence, while prosecutors called it a painful but necessary pursuit of truth. Assistant District Attorney Ryan Trask said, "It was always clear who pulled the trigger, justice just took time to catch up." The Armstrong tragedy serves as a stark warning: unchecked anger, secrecy, and denial can destroy even the most devoted families. No matter how perfect a home appears, silence can hide deep fractures. Sometimes, the hardest truth is the one that lives under your own roof. Number 10. Renard Spivey. It began as a quiet summer night in Houston, but by morning, one of the city's most recognizable law enforcement faces would be accused of murder. On the 28th of July 2019, police responded to a 911 call from Renard Spivey, a former Harris County Sheriff's deputy and television bailiff on the syndicated show Justice for All with Judge Christina Perez. His wife, 52-year-old Patricia Spivey, was found shot to death inside the couple's bedroom closet. Renard, bleeding from a gunshot wound to his thigh, told officers the shooting was accidental, the result of a struggle over his own gun. Investigators quickly learned the couple had been arguing throughout the day. Patricia's brother, Ezra Washington, said Renard had called him 3 times, describing escalating tension about intimacy, jealousy, and Patricia's suspicion that he was back on steroids or seeing another woman. Hours before the shooting, Renard allegedly told him, "She's going to make me rise up like the Incredible Hulk, and it ain't gonna be good." According to Renard's statement, the argument reignited just after 3 a.m. He said Patricia confronted him about her phone, accused him of betrayal, and grabbed his loaded 9mm pistol. Renard claimed he feared for his life when she pointed it at him. During the struggle, he said, the gun fired 3 times, once striking him in the leg, and twice hitting Patricia. "I didn't pull the trigger," he insisted, saying the shots went off as he twisted the gun away. When officers arrived, they found Patricia dead from a gunshot wound to the chest. The weapon was placed on a clothes hamper, and bruising around her wrists suggested a violent struggle. Investigators were skeptical. The medical examiner ruled Patricia's death a homicide, and prosecutors questioned how a trained, 290-pound deputy could not control the firearm. Some suggested the wound to his thigh may have been self-inflicted to support his story. Renard was arrested and charged with murder. Bail was set at $50,000, and he resigned from the sheriff's office. 4 years later, in November 2023, his long-delayed trial began. His defense, led by attorney Dick DeGuerin, argued the shooting was an accident, the product of a split-second struggle with an unsafe semi-automatic pistol. After 12 hours of deliberation, jurors found him not guilty. In court, Renard collapsed in tears. "I miss my wife every day," he said later. Patricia's family, however, rejected the verdict. Her daughter, Patrina Marshall, said, "My mother didn't get justice. He walked away free while she's gone forever." The case reignited conversations about domestic disputes involving law enforcement officers and the difficulty of proving intent behind closed doors. From this tragedy, 3 vital lessons emerge: unresolved anger and jealousy can turn lethal without intervention, firearms intensify domestic conflict beyond control, and silence in toxic relationships can be deadly. Seeking help isn't weakness, it's survival. Even when a courtroom delivers a verdict, the line between guilt and grief can remain painfully blurred. Evil hides in plain sight, behind badges, smiles, and family walls. Houston's most chilling killers remind us that danger doesn't always wear a mask. If these stories shook you, there's more truth waiting beneath the surface. We uncover the cases others won't touch, the crimes buried under silence, power, and fear. Don't just watch justice unfold, be part of it. Subscribe now to Justice Reversed and hit the bell icon, so you'll be the first to witness the next shocking chapter in America's dark history.